I took part in 2 game jams at the same time and made 2 games in 2 days. Why? Because I'm a glutton for punishment.
I'm Xanderwood. I make indie games and tutorials on game development. I also play your indie games every week on my channel. Make sure you subscribe and click that bell icon so you never miss a video.
Before we get into the video, just a massive shout out to my Patreons, James Welch, Selwyn, Basic Terror and Fruzel CC. As always, thank you so much for your support, it really does mean a lot. I'd already signed up for Icoso's Geo Jam when Helper Wesley slid into my DMs, inviting me to come join the Fireside Jam he was hosting. At first I said I was already involved in another jam, but quickly decided to throw sand in the face of monogamy and play the field. After all, what could be better than 1 game jam? 2, of course, right? Themes were revealed,
rejuvenation,
and the Geo Jam's theme was the other side. I already knew my idea for the Geo Jam. I was planning a sequel to Minima, a game Icoso submitted to the Less is More Jam by Jonas Tyrola. I was so impressed with what Icoso did with that simple little platformer that I wanted to replicate it in some form of tribute game. And that game became Minima 2, the other side. The only thing I needed to do when the theme was announced was figure out how to make Minima 2 fit the theme. My first idea was the concept of crossing over into another dimension. I took the idea that the cube had been transported to an alternate dimension and had to find its way back. You'd control the original cube, but the goal would be to get the second cube on the other side of the screen to the goal. The second cube would follow the same path as the first, but with a 1-second delay on the controls. The Fireside Rejuvenation Jam was a completely different story. I had already started over 3 times at this point, as I couldn't find an idea that I was passionate about. The first idea was a marathon game, where you were running in a race against AI runners and had to keep stopping to rejuvenate your stamina. I got to the point where I had the AI runners following random paths, but I couldn't see myself being able to get this simple enough to finish within the jam's time frame, so I scrapped it. My second idea was to create a physics-based game where you had to launch a rocket up the screen, making sure it didn't run out of fuel. You would be able to rejuvenate your rocket by giving it more fuel, which would increase its speed. I quickly realised this idea was terrible, so I scrapped it. I needed to think and think fast. Then it hit me. A racing game where the integrity of your car diminished each time you crashed. Successfully completing a lap would restore your car slightly, and the goal will be to complete as many laps as possible until your car fell apart. I made a start on the basic game loop, which was getting the car to perpetually move forward at a set speed while giving the player steer left and steer right controls. Construct has a great built-in behaviour that handles this, called the car behaviour. What else would you call it? I could simply set the steering buttons to A and D, set the speed, and we had a game. I then made the track and the start grid using Construct's built-in editor and set some basic collisions to detect if the player was colliding with the wall. Each time the car passed the start grid, I reset the max car speed to equal itself plus 25, meaning it would become more difficult to control and steer with each successful lap, creating progressive difficulty. I threw the link to my prototype into my Discord to ask for feedback, and the ever-reliable Whateep gave it a try. The feedback was that it needed to fit the theme better, so why not add some car degeneration, smoke and visible signs of damage that could be rejuvenated each time you passed the start grid. I did just that, and agree it was better. Back over in the Minima 2 jam, I needed to take stock of everything that made Minima 1 so great, so I played it, again, and again, whilst noting down all the traps and interactions it had. My original idea was to make the levels exactly like Minima for the top half of the screen, and change the bottom, which would be where the true challenge lies, but decided against it in fear of copyright infringement. Plus, I liked the idea of creating new levels. After I finished Minima, I decided I would add spikes, bounce pads, endless drops, and projectiles as the hazards for Minima 2. I created the cube, gave it the platform behaviour. It took a few tweaks to get it controlling like the original cube in Minima 1. It wasn't perfect, but I was happy with it. I added the trail to the movement using a particle effect that had 0 speed, and set it to the player's X and Y position every tick. One of the nice little touches in Minima 1 is the sound variety when you jump. The pitch changes and the jump sounds slightly different each time the player jumps, which creates a subtle variety and makes the player so much more enjoyable to control. I did the same thing, except I uploaded 3 different jump sounds and told the system to pick one at random each time the player jumped. Once the character was working, I started building the levels. This was the easy part. I created a new layout for each level with a trigger that the second cube needed to collide with in order to move the game to the next level. If the second player touches a trigger point, it loads the next layout. Over at the Fireside Jam, things were coming along nicely. I added some heart pickups that the player could collect to get rejuvenated mid-lap, and a system that detected whether the player had completed a perfect lap, meaning they didn't crash. If the player crosses the start grid without taking damage on the previous lap, the course turns blue and the score increases at a faster rate until they eventually crash. I added some smoke to the car if damage was taken to a certain level, and I changed the car's opacity to equal the damage the car had taken, meaning that you would become less visible the more damage you took. I uploaded 5 music tracks from my music asset packs, link in the description if you want to download them, and set the game to pick one at random each time the level starts. I then added a title screen and end screen to show the player's stats, and the game was pretty much done. Back over at Minima 2, I had completed all 10 levels, with the final level being the room where you had to get both cubes into a teleporter to merge the 2 dimensions back to normal. This was a simple if statement saying that if player and second cube were both overlapping the teleporter, go to next layout. This would then take you to the end screen and display your stats. I set a timer goal that based on your completion time would give you a playstyle. With both games now finished, inside 2 days, I uploaded them to Itch, grabbed a beer, and watched as the other games started rolling in. A massive thank you to Icoso and Helper Wesley for hosting such a great game jam, and if you don't already follow these amazing devs, there's a link to their channels in the description. So head over there and tell them Xanderwood sent you. Until next time, my friends, take care and goodbye.